The incredible story of Enoch, the man who was taken by God. Impactful biblical story. If you like this story of Enoch and want to keep discovering other stories of faith and overcoming, remember that this channel is a Bible in voice, and don't forget to give this video a like and share it with your loved ones. Oh, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together we'll explore powerful lessons from the Bible. Enoch lived so close to God that instead of facing death, he was taken straight to heaven. He's known as a man who didn't die, a biblical mystery that spans generations and inspires us to this day. In the beginning, the world was still a young land, throbbing under the weight of the first human generations that were closer to God than any generation to come. But over time, humanity drifted day after day from the essence of those who had created it. The descendant of Adam and Eve had now spread across the land, multiplying and building their lives. But corruption and violence began to lurk. They were tough times, times of growing darkness, and it was exactly in this era, marked by the mix of creation's splendor and man's decay, when Enoch came into the world. Born in the lineage of Seth, Adam's third son, Enoch carried in his veins the same blood as those who once walked in the Garden of Eden. Unlike many around him, he didn't just inherit the way of the fall, but also a spark of a life centered on God. From a young age, Enoch's eyes seemed to shine with a unique curiosity, as if he were searching for answers to questions no one around him dared to ask. As the years passed, Enoch's fame began to grow. It was as if he carried something other men had forgotten, a quest for the divine essence that once dwelled in his lineage's heart. This mysterious path and this thirst for something greater were like omens of a journey yet to come, and while the world continued its dark rhythm, Enoch took every step toward a destiny far beyond imagination, driven by something he couldn't yet name, but that called him to something extraordinary. Over time, Enoch began to stand out even more among the men of his time. He was a man like any other, with common worries and challenges, but there was something in his stance, his attentive gaze, and his calm demeanor that sparked curiosity. While many around him sought to satisfy themselves with the distractions of daily life, Enoch seemed to live in another dimension, a reality invisible to most eyes. He observed the world differently, as he saw layers that escaped the hurried glance of others. To him, the beauties of nature and the mystery of the sky weren't just part of scenery. They were signs of a greater presence. Everything around him seemed to speak of God. Enoch was an ordinary man, but he carried within him a thirst for something eternal, something pure and unknown that burned like a fire inside him. He knew, deep down, that the world had a purpose beyond what his eyes could see, and that there was a creator behind it all, waiting to be discovered. In the silence of starry nights or under the shade of trees at dusk, Enoch meditated in search of answers. He felt he was being drawn into a communion no one around him understood. The other men saw Enoch as eccentric, perhaps even distant. What they didn't know was that with every step, something guided him, starting to fill his soul and shape his destiny. There was a subtle, deep call that gradually became impossible to ignore. It was on one of those quiet nights that something different happened. Enoch, lost in his thoughts and prayers, felt a presence so strong it was as if the air around him pulsed. There was a voice, not audible but clear in his heart, like a whisper that echoed through his entire soul. It was a call. Something pulled at him, awakening within him the certainty that God was seeking him, wanting to be closer to him. Enoch had never felt anything like it. It was as if his whole being was drawn to a purpose, a mission he didn't yet fully understand. From that day on, Enoch's life took a new direction. He realized he could no longer live as before, caught up in the fleeting things of the world. This call, this soft but firm voice, invited him to a higher path, a journey of surrender. It wasn't easy, because he knew this path would distance him from the ordinary life of other men. But Enoch was determined. He felt this journey was bigger than him, bigger than anything he knew. And then, in silence, he began to walk this path, seeking to live every day in God's presence. With every step, Enoch felt he was closer to unraveling the mystery of this call. The people around him might not have understood him, but he knew he was where he was meant to be. The sense that something grand was lurking, waiting for his heart to be ready, was like a constant spark in his soul. Enoch moved forward, alert and willing, unaware that this path would lead him to experiences and revelations no other man would ever know. From that moment, Enoch lived as a different man. His walk with God wasn't just a matter of belief or words. It was a relationship that guided every choice, every step. While the men around him chased conquests, riches, and pleasures, Enoch followed his own path, a lonely one in others' eyes. He walked with God, and that was his greatest achievement. The life others sought on earth, he found in communion with the Creator. This walk with God wasn't easy, but Enoch no longer had doubts. There were days when he felt like he was walking against the wind, when his faith was tested by everyday's struggles. Even so, nothing shook a conviction. He knew the path he was taking was right, and whenever doubt threatened to rise, God's presence made itself felt subtle and powerful, renewing his strength and filling his heart with peace. And so, amid faith and daily challenges, Enoch became a living example of surrender and love for Creator. He knew his journey was unique, and that certainty filled him. In those times of rising violence and chaos, Enoch was like an oasis of serenity. Wherever he went, his presence left a mark, like a ray of light piercing the shadow. People watched him. Some admired him. Others distrusted him. But no one could ignore his presence. Enoch didn't seek approval, didn't seek honors. He only wanted one thing: to live in complete harmony with God. Every day, this communion grew deeper, as if his steps were taking him beyond the earthly. Enoch barely noticed, but his life was turning into something beyond the ordinary, something those around him couldn't grasp. He walked toward the unseen, not knowing this path would lead to something that would forever change his story's destiny. Every day that passed, Enoch's connection with God grew more intense and deep. It was as if, with every step he took, he plunged deeper into an ocean of peace and wisdom. He didn't just pray, he spoke with God, felt the Creator in everything around him, in the small wonders of daily life, in the whisper of the trees, in the gleam of stars streaking the dark sky. The world was no longer just a physical place for Enoch. It was a reflection of divine presence. With this closeness, Enoch began to see beyond what human eyes could perceive. He was filled with a wisdom not of this world, as if God himself revealed hidden secrets, deep truths about good and evil, about creation and the mysteries of heaven. And yet, Enoch remained and lived his life with a simplicity that contrasted with the grandeur of the visions he received. He didn't use this knowledge to exalt himself, but to strengthen his devotion and obedience. The other men, watching Enoch, noticed he was different, but couldn't understand what made him so special. Enoch didn't care about others' opinions. He followed his path, faithful to the call he felt, while the world around him headed toward chaos. He lived in a parallel reality, in deep harmony, guided by God's invisible hand. It was as if his soul were tuned to a frequency only he could hear, a divine melody that enveloped and transformed him. Enoch knew his life was marked for something special, even without understanding what the future held. Every day he surrendered more, and God's presence was so strong it seemed almost tangible. This sacred bond guided him toward a destiny he couldn't even imagine, but that awaited him with mysteries that gradually began to unfold. Over time, Enoch's life became more than a mystery. It was a living testament to God's presence among men. He didn't need to say much. His very way of living was like an open book speaking of God's goodness and faithfulness. The people around him felt something different in his presence, something that made them pause and wonder about life, about what really mattered. There was an almost tangible peace around Enoch, as if heaven were always near him. Some saw him as an inspiration, proof that it was possible to live with integrity in a corrupt world. Others, though, looked at him with suspicion, maybe even a hint of fear. How could he live so peacefully while the world seemed to crumble? To Enoch, however, other people's reactions didn't matter. His only concern was drawing ever closer to God. What he didn't realize was that his life became a light for those still seeking the right path. Like a beacon in the darkness. Even those who didn't understand or accept his faith were touched somehow. It was as if Enoch's presence revealed, without words, a truth no one could deny. He didn't isolate himself, yet he wasn't like the rest. His unshakable faith made him a kind of bridge between the human and the divine, and every day that connection seemed to grow, illuminating everything around with an intensity that couldn't be ignored. Time passed, and Enoch kept walking with God, steadfast in his faith and conviction. He knew all this had a purpose greater than human understanding itself. And though he couldn't see what lay ahead, he felt something big was coming, a destiny only God himself could reveal. Enoch continued his journey with his gaze fixed upward, unaware that his life was about to take a new step into the unknown. One day, amid his reflections, Enoch began to feel something different in his heart. It was as if a deep vision was revealed to him, a glimpse of what was to come. In his walk with God, he started seeing beyond the present, glimpsing images that spoke of a distant future full of mysteries and warnings, as if the Creator himself were showing him the course humanity was taking. Enoch caught a glimpse of divine judgment, a time when God's justice would be fulfilled and manifest on earth. These visions weren't easy to bear. They came with a weight, a responsibility Enoch had never felt before. He saw men increasingly given over to evil, pride invading their hearts, and injustice spreading like a dark shadow. Amid these revelations, God showed him that he wouldn't ignore evil forever. There would be a day when the Creator would judge the earth, bringing justice and balance. Enoch felt he needed to speak out, to warn those around him, even if many would laugh or ignore him. Moved by the truth of the visions, Enoch began sharing what he knew. His words were strong, full of authority, like thunder in a clear sky. He spoke of the coming judgment, of a need to turn back to God before it was too late. Though some listened with indifference, others heard with stirred hearts, sensing those words carried something true and profound. Enoch knew his mission wasn't to convince everyone, but to plant a seed, a reminder that God watches and acts. As he shared these truths, Enoch kept walking with God, knowing these visions weren't just for others, but for himself too. The path he followed drew him ever closer to Creator, and with each revelation, he felt a new step in his journey rising on the horizon, awaiting the right moment to unfold. During this journey of deep connection with God, Enoch also experienced becoming a father. When Methuselah was born, his heart filled with new joy and responsibility. He looked at his son in his arms and felt the weight of a future stretching far beyond his own days. Methuselah, in time, would become the longest-lived man in history, carrying a heritage of a lineage marked by a desire to follow God's will. Enoch, in his quiet wisdom, ensured his son grew up knowing the fear and righteousness that were already hallmarks of his family. But Enoch knew his role didn't end there. He felt that, somehow, his lineage was destined for something great and at the same time, terrible. His intuition told him the world was drawing closer to a breaking point, a moment when God's justice would shine forth. And this certainty wasn't just a vague feeling. It was a deep understanding, as if he could see in his mind the future generations, including one that would someday witness a great flood. Years passed, and Methuselah grew under Enoch's guidance, becoming part of a lineage that would be vital to humanity's future. Enoch lived to see his grandson Lamech's generation, then Noah's. There was something special about Noah, a gleam in his eyes that reminded Enoch of himself, of that call to a greater purpose. Though Enoch might not have known what lay ahead for Noah, he felt in his heart that his grandson would be of great importance in God's plans. And so time went on. Enoch remained his family's pillar, a living example of faith and communion with God. Every day with Methuselah and his descendants was a reminder that he was part of something far bigger. He saw his past continuity reflected in his children's and grandchildren's eyes, feeling the Creator was paving their way, while his own destiny awaited with mysteries ever nearer. As the years went by, Enoch's closeness to God grew so intense, he no longer seemed to fully belong to this world. It was as if his soul dwelled in a space between heaven and earth, in a communion that enveloped him in a way no one around him could comprehend. While other men wrestled with their struggles and passions, Enoch walked in silence, wrapped in a peace beyond earthly worries. His relationship with God had reached a depth so profound that he often seemed absent to others, as if his mind and spirit were in another dimension. Enoch lived on an invisible frequency, connected to something as real to him as the ground beneath his feet. Words were no longer needed to commune with God. All it took was a thought, a sigh, and he felt the divine presence responding in a subtle yet powerful way. It was a connection that pulled him further from the physical world and closer to something eternal. Enoch's absence left people silent, pondering what it truly meant. Many saw his departure as a powerful metaphor, a reminder that walking with God could be so profound it transcended the bounds of ordinary life. Others looked to the sky for answers, wondering where the man who once walked among them had gone, now seeming to dwell among the stars. Those privileged to know Enoch in life recalled every detail of his presence. The serene gaze, the wise words, the calm he radiated. His story passed down through generations like a precious secret. Little by little, he became not just a man of faith, but a bridge between the visible and invisible worlds, a constant reminder that there's more to life than meets the eye. And as these stories spread, a new hope was born. Enoch had left a legacy, a path of faith and closeness to God that many now long to follow, knowing that walking with the Creator promised extraordinary destinies. And that longing spread quietly, like a subtle call that, day by day, awaited the next person bold enough to answer. Over time, Enoch's story became a symbol of hope and mystery for all who heard it. He wasn't just a man who vanished without a trace, but a man who experienced God's presence so intensely he crossed the line between heaven and earth. For many, Enoch was proof that the Creator was closer than they could imagine, and that walking with him was a possible call, an invitation to a life unbound by human limits. Every detail of the story was told with reverence. The man who walked with God, who lived among people, but already bore within him the glow of the unseen. His steps, his faith, his way of seeing the world were remembered as an example. Enoch hadn't been a perfect man, but he was a devoted one, someone who chose God's path when few cared. His life was an open letter that, even after his departure, kept guiding others to follow their own steps of faith. Elders whispered his story on starry nights, and youths listened with shining eyes, feeling that same call in their hearts. Enoch had lived with such devotion that he became eternal in the people's memory, an invisible bond tying them to the same Creator. And so, his story began to echo through generations, a living reminder that by walking with God, we can touch the eternal and perhaps one day become part of that sacred mystery. Enoch's story, ancient as it is, remains alive like a whisper echoing through time, bringing with it profound lessons. What makes this journey so special isn't just that God took him without passing through death, but how he lived, with a surrendered heart and an unrelenting desire to be near the Creator. Enoch shows us that walking with God isn't about distance or intangibility, but about choice and closeness, a commitment renewed with every step, every day. His life teaches us that true faith is quiet, deep, and lived out in the small choices of each day. Enoch didn't need recognition or glory. He lived for God, and that was his greatest triumph. The simplicity with which he walked beside the Creator reminds us that, in the end, it's the quality of our communion with God that defines us, far more than the deeds we do or what we own. In every generation, there are those who hear the call to walk with God more intimately. Enoch's story is a reminder that this journey is possible for all. He inspires us to seek this peace, this deep connection that transcends human understanding and draws us near the sacred. Perhaps, like Enoch, We'll never fully grasp what lies on the other side of this path, but he showed us that when we choose to walk with God, we connect with something greater than ourselves, something eternal and full of mysteries. If you like the story of Enoch and want to keep discovering other stories of faith and overcoming, remember that this channel is the Bible in videos, and don't forget to give this video a like and share it with your loved ones. Oh, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together we'll explore powerful lessons from the Bible